here we have Lula went to Beijing, and he not only did he not pledge to help in the Ukraine war, he said that the United States and other countries must stop supplying weapons and encouraging war. Let's listen to what he said. Here we go. He says, patience is needed to talk with the president of Russia. It takes patience to talk with the president of Ukraine. But we have to, above all, convince the countries that are supplying weapons, encouraging war, to stop. I think China has a very important role. I keep reiterating that China has possibly the most important role. Now, another important country is the United States. That is, the United States needs to stop encouraging war and start talking about peace. The European Union needs to start talking about peace in order to be able to convince Putin and Zelensky that peace interests everybody and war only interests the two of them. Now, imagine if when I say stuff like that in the United States, I'm called a right-winger. I'm called a Putin puppet. I'm called crazy stuff like this. Brazilian President Lula risks alienating the United States and Europe as he hosts Iranian warships, equivocates over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and negotiates with China. Brazilian President Lula is parroting Russian and Chinese propaganda by claiming that the West is not interested in ending the fighting in Ukraine. So John Kirby, he's the U.S. spokesman, National Security Council spokesman, and he says that Lula is repeating China and Russia propaganda. Okay.
Look at his face too. That's the Anthony Weiner getting caught again on phone porn.
That is what that is.
That shame phase.
Hassan Mafi says Lula simply said, let's stop the war and start peace negotiations. How is this Russian and Chinese propaganda? The U.S. is just upset that Lula didn't parrot U.S. propaganda about the Ukraine war. That's exactly right. Here's Glenn going to make that point. Very telling that if one goes to D.C., the only place one can hear this message is from the right-wing populist wing of the GOP. Every single Democrat from Bernie Sanders to AOC voted to fund the war in Ukraine, what Lula calls incentivizing and encouraging the war. It has been the most craziest thing I've seen in my life, I think, politically, to see the Democrats become the pro-war party, and only people who are anti-war or for peace are in the Republican Party. It's been the craziest flip-flop I've ever seen, but it's real. And Trump was much less of an interventionist than Barack Obama and certainly Joe Biden. So let me bring in our guest from the Duran. What do you make of Lula coming out now and telling the United States to stop sending weapons there, and that telling the world that we're encouraging war? That's a big deal, right?
It's a huge deal. After all, he's the president of Brazil, the biggest of all the Latin American countries, and one of the major powers in the world today. And just to make the point, Lula, talking about left and right and stances on war, Lula is, of course, absolutely a man of the left. I mean, he's actually been a man of the left all of his political life. He's been in great danger fighting left-wing causes, democratic, socialist causes in Brazil. I mean, he had to struggle against a real right-wing fascist military dictatorship in Brazil. If he's taking these positions, well, you can't just say it's only right-wing populist people who are talking about peace. And for me personally, and I'm sure it's also for many other people, the situation where the left advocates war, this kind of war, and you find a few people on the right who are saying, well, maybe this isn't such a good idea after all. Well, that for me is the world turned upside down. It's the reverse of the world I remembered and was a part of right up until, all those protests against the Iraq war 20 years ago. So, yes, this is a huge deal. Lula coming out, talking about the need for peace. But why is that even controversial? Surely we should be seeking peace. We should be seeking peace in Europe. We should be seeking peace between the nuclear superpowers. The stakes, the dangers in war are enormous. And by the way, whether or not this is the start of the decline of the American empire, I don't know one way or the other. But what I will say is this. For the United States itself, this is a time of change in the world, and it's one that the United States can adapt to and come through well from. On the Duran, a few days ago, we had an interview with a very senior diplomat, a former ambassador to Moscow, of another of the great powers of the world today, which was India. He was the Indian ambassador to Moscow. And he said, multipolarity is coming. It is inevitable. The difference is that we were expecting and hoping a few years ago that it would be a negotiated multipolarity with the United States. And instead, it is becoming a contested one. And that is why there is a crisis in the international system. That is why we're seeing wars. That's why we're seeing war in Ukraine. That's why we're having these tensions in China. It doesn't have to be this way. You can negotiate these things. You can reach compromises. Core American interests, the real interests of Americans, the ones that matter to the American people, who need to have better schools, better health systems, all of those things, they can be fully accommodated. In fact, they can be improved in this new world that is coming if it is negotiated properly.
I don't see that happening, though. You don't see that happening. Do you? Alex, what do you think about that?
I mean, you know, everything Alexander said is spot on, but I mean, you're dealing with the neocon White House, and that's just a fact. Biden is a neocon. He always has been a neocon. 50 years in government, he has always been pro-war. He's a neocon. He's surrounded by neocons: Sullivan, Blinken, Newland. And for the neocons, this is not about Ukraine. This is about destroying Russia. It's about getting regime change in Russia. And Lula is talking about peace in Ukraine. But for the neocons that are running the White House, for them, their goal is regime change in Russia. And if they can't get regime change in Russia, then they need to quickly focus in on China. And this is the grand chessboard that these neocons are playing on. And we talk about this on the Duran all the time. And Alexander mentions this all the time. These people, these neocons, they see countries as chess pieces, and they're moving the pieces around, and they're conquering these places and subjugating these people. And to them, this is all one big game. Lula is talking practical things. He's being rational. But for the guys that are running the show, this is not about America. It's not about Ukraine. It's about getting Eurasia. It's about getting Putin out of office. It's about putting China back in a box.
Yeah, we're being led by a bunch of out-of-touch psychopaths who, thrive on a war economy. And this is the capture of the American foreign policy and government by the military-industrial complex, something that Eisenhower warned us against. And, of course, it's happened. And, now we have people living under every bridge in America, as we have 1,000 military bases. We just added 3 more in the Philippines in the last couple months. No other country does this. No other country in the world does this. And now the rest of the world is waking up to the fact that they're done being bullied by America. It's not only BRICS, it's not only Lula, but Macron has also said that, made the same kind of inferences. Also, Germany now is starting to say these same types of things. And I don't understand why Germany's going along with this crazy stuff that the United States is doing, but it seems like they probably won't be doing that much longer. We're telling jokes in Nashville, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Baltimore, Chicago, Rosemont, San Diego, and more. Go to jimmydore.com to get a link for all those tickets. Plus, you can watch my new special, COVID Lies Are Funny.